The city, once a map of closed doors, began to unfold in small, unexpected ways. Nia no longer walked the long stretch from her dormitory to the lecture halls with her eyes fixed on the pavement. She had started to notice things: the crooked street light that flickered like a heartbeat at the bus stop, the bakery woman who always swept crumbs into a neat pile before locking the door, even the boy on a skateboard who nearly collided with her every Tuesday morning. These details stitched themselves into her days, softening the edges of the cold. It wasn't that everything suddenly became easy. Professors still spoke too fast, classmates still hesitated before pairing with her in group projects, and her accent still bent awkwardly around certain words. But something had shifted. It was as though the city had stopped trying to erase her and instead began to tolerate her presence, even welcome it in rare moments. David remained part of this slow transformation. He wasn't loud or particularly brave, but he was steady. Sometimes he walked beside her to class, his long strides awkwardly matching hers. Sometimes they studied in silence, their pens scratching across paper in a rhythm that felt like quiet companionship. He never asked too many questions, which she appreciated. Instead, he seemed content to simply exist in her orbit, as if he knew she needed that more than anything. Their friendship grew not in grand gestures but in fragments: half a sandwich shared when her lunch card failed, his coat draped over her shoulders when the heating broke in the library, his shy smile when she finally laughed out loud in a space that once silenced her. It was in those moments that Nia realized she was no longer just surviving. She was beginning, cautiously, to live. One evening, after a long day of lectures, David nudged her arm and suggested they take a different path home. She almost refused. Routine had become her shield, but something in his tone convinced her. They wandered through narrow side streets she had never dared to enter alone, streets that smelled of roasted chestnuts and hummed with music from tiny, hidden cafes. For the first time, she saw the city not as an opponent but as a place with layers, waiting to be discovered. In one cafe, lit only by candles and soft laughter, she sat at a wooden table and felt her guard loosen. The walls were covered with photographs of strangers who had once passed through, people who had laughed, studied, dreamed within those same walls. She wondered if she, too, would one day become part of such a story, her image a reminder to someone else that they had not been invisible. Nia found herself smiling more, even at her own reflection in the cracked dorm mirror. It still fractured her face into uneven shards, but she no longer recoiled. Instead, she touched the glass gently, as though greeting an old friend. The girl looking back at her was tired, yes, but she was also stronger, steadier. Letters from home continued to arrive, the handwriting messy and full of warmth. Her mother's words reminded her that strength was not about never bending, it was about bending without breaking. And in the silence of her room, Nia whispered back promises, not of escape, but of endurance, and maybe even of belonging. By the end of the semester, her professors had begun to learn her name. One of them even praised her essay for its perspective, a small acknowledgement that carried the weight of 1,000 unseen efforts. She walked home that day with her chest lifted, the city air cold but not cruel against her skin. That night, she lay in bed not with fear, but with a fragile sense of hope. For the first time since arriving, she allowed herself to believe that she could shape a future here, not as an outsider clinging to survival, but as a young woman carving a place for herself in a world that had once seemed unreachable. And though she did not know what awaited her beyond this fragile beginning, she knew one thing: she was no longer standing on the edge of loneliness. She was already stepping across.